Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kabbalah Explained Simply. Hello to everyone who's already tuned in. If you're just joining right now, please let me know where you're watching from. It's always great to see people with a desire for spiritual development from all around the world connecting to this broadcast. My name is Asaf or Joseph, that also works. Uh, Sometimes better for English speakers. I am broadcasting to you live from Israel. I am a senior instructor at KabU, which is our online education center. And maybe I'll share some more details about that and how you can join KabU later on. This session today is dedicated to your questions. So I really hope to get a lot of questions from you. Just throw them into the chat. As soon as you have a question, just throw it in. Um, Ruth behind the scenes is helping me out here, and she'll collect all the questions so that we can try to really not miss even one. So as soon as you have a question, just throw it into the chat. And yeah, I think we're ready to start here. It also will be nice if someone can give me a thumbs up in the chat, just to know that you hear me and see me well. And um, I already see friends connecting from Salt Lake City, from the Netherlands, from Pennsylvania, from Groningen, from North Carolina, um, also from Louisiana, and yeah, a few other places, Alberta, Canada, Boynton Beach, Florida. All right. Yeah, Hungary. Hello, Maria. Yeah, good to see you all. Great to see you. Yeah, so we're gonna start. Okay, I get the thumbs up that you can all see me and hear me well. So quick intro, and we'll start. All right. So welcome to Kabbalah Explained Simply. This session will be mostly dedicated to questions and answers. If you have any questions at all that you think Kabbalah can give advice for, or you would just like to hear the Kabbalistic perspective about a certain topic, any topic at all, whether it's directly related to Kabbalah or not directly related to Kabbalah, I will do my best to give an answer based on the authentic wisdom of Kabbalah. And until you come up with some questions that you'd like to ask, I want to read to you a quote that I think should be relevant to anyone who's here. Doesn't matter where you're from in the world, what is your background, whether you're already a KabU student or not yet, whether you're and if you are a KabU student, you might be in the first course or the second course or beyond that. I think this quote relates to all of us. By us, I mean seekers, spiritual seekers, people who are interested in developing their soul, if you want to call it that way, developing their internality, developing their contact with the reality that is currently hidden from us, the reality that is deeper than the five senses that allow us to perceive the physical world. So it's the layer of reality that's hidden from us. Kabbalists relate to the hidden layer of reality or the hidden reality or the upper world. They call it different names, or spirituality. You can call it however you want. But what it is, from the description of the Kabbalists, is the level of causes, the level of reasons, the level from which everything that happens in our world comes from. So everything that we know about our life, who we are, where we live, what's happening in the world. And by the way, as of um, right now, I was just looking into it. The world is, uh, I think we all know that the world is not doing so well. But I just looked into some numbers, and it turns out that there's over 100 armed conflicts that either are still happening or that collectively have happened in 2025 alone. So we only know about a few wars that from the mainstream media. Probably you've heard about what's happening in between Russia and Ukraine. You've heard about the Middle East here in Israel, but there's many other places in Asia and Africa um, and many other places where armed conflicts are taking place. And I'm mentioning that because when we come to see what is happening in our world and we only see the outcomes, the results, the consequences through our five senses, we are definitely misinterpreting what's going on, and therefore our path to a solution, to a viable solution, to a real solution, is also lacking because we're not seeing the whole picture. And so, us, people who are here, people who are interested in spiritual development, people who have this unique desire to sort of peek behind the curtain of what the five senses show us and try to look beyond into the world of forces, the world of reasons, the world of um, roots, where everything comes from, where everything descends from. We have this unique desire to do this, but we're also connected to the rest of the world, even if we don't feel it. Much like how scientists discover that on the vegetative level of nature, for example, uh, all the vegetation, all the plants um, of the world of planet Earth are it's in some way connected in many cases through an underground network of mycelium that connects pretty much all of the vegetation across planet Earth. So in a similar way, there's some sort of a connection, an interconnection between all humans that exists under the surface, under the hood. And we're not experiencing reality this way. We intuitively feel like we are separated individuals, and the entire world and all members of humanity feel to us like 8 billion separated individual beings. But behind the curtain, we're all connected to the point that we're actually a single collective entity. And that is one aspect of the deeper reality, the hidden reality, or in other words, the connected reality that we, through our ordinary bodily perception, can't experience. Um, so the people who are here, the people who have this unique desire for spiritual development, have the ability to start developing the the glasses, let's say, or the eyes through which we can begin to see these connections. And these connections also exist in a very specific way between us, meaning the people who awaken towards spiritual development, doesn't matter where you are in the world. And as we can see from the chat here, we're all over the place. It doesn't matter whether we are male or female. It doesn't matter what is our background. It doesn't matter what is our culture, even the language we speak. That desire connects us to a kind of an organism, a kind of a network that has a certain specific influence on the rest of humanity, and that's because all of humanity is developing as well towards spiritual development, but there is a difference. between the people who just live their lives not even thinking about spiritual development and those who have a conscious thought, a conscious question, a conscious need to discover the spiritual world. And the difference is that those who are seeking spiritual development, they, in their efforts to develop, they're also influencing the rest of humanity. That, of course, is not something that is instantly apparent to us, but it's something that you come to feel as you develop further and further, that the world is really not that huge and vast as it seems. It actually all is like a global village, and I'm not just talking about the physical interconnections of globalization, such as global trade and commerce and banking systems and all that. These are just reflections of a deeper reality. And in that deeper reality, all of humanity is actually a single entity beyond time and space. And what we see in our world, this development that appears to us like the life and death of many generations after generations of mankind, that is the way in which we interpret reality, the way in which we perceive reality. But Kabbalists explain to us that there's really just one entity, a single collective entity of which we're all parts, and that entity is developing gradually towards its spiritual purpose. All right, I'm going to move on to the quote that I wanted to read to you, and we'll go from there. If you already have questions, I will definitely get to them in just a few minutes. So, check this out. This is a quote from my teacher's teacher, the great Kabbalist, the Rabash, Kabbalist Baruch Shalom Ashlag. And here's what he writes. Before one obtains some illumination from above, one should seek out like-minded people who are also seeking to enhance the importance of any possible contact with the Creator. And when many people support it, everyone can receive assistance from the others. This is very, very important for all of us who want to develop spiritually. What Rabash tells us here, the great Kabbalist, tells us here that we can receive a very important power, fuel, inspiration, motivation from each other as we are seeking spiritual development. Meaning that if we have, each of us has this unique desire that wants to find connection with spirituality or connection with the Creator, doesn't matter how we call it at this point, but connection with the unseen layer of reality, the higher, the deeper level of reality, call it however you see fit. But if you have that desire and you manage to surround yourself with other like-minded people or like-hearted people, then there is a sort of resonance that happens between these people who are spiritual seekers. And that resonance, by the way, uh, transcends time and space. It doesn't matter if we are geographically separate from each other. It doesn't matter if we are living in different time zones. This network of desires affects us. And if we learn how to use it, then we can receive a lot of power for spiritual development that each of us as individuals can receive from that network. And that's why even being here right now in this broadcast together and feeling that we are connected, Even if we don't say a word, we can of course use the chat and kind of get a sense of how many people are connected from different parts of the world and so on. But these are just indications, external indications. If we put our hearts, set our hearts to focus on this network that we are now connected to, and we wish to inspire and be inspired by that network, this session right now will feel much more powerful for each of us. Now, in KabU, our education center, we what I'm telling you now is just kind of something in a nutshell. But in our education center in KabU, we are gradually teaching this method, how to gradually, step by step, first learn the foundations about how reality works, what's the structure of reality, where does our unique desire for spiritual development come from, and why, and where is it headed, and what are the advanced stages of spiritual development that Kabbalists have discovered, and how can we use their texts in order to be inspired by them and to pull us towards those higher states. And we learn about all of that in a very structured manner, in a very systematic manner, step by step. And what we gradually teach anyone who's interested there in KabU is um, how to position ourselves correctly towards each other, all of us spiritual seekers, so that we can really derive all that this network has to give to us. And that is really the key for spiritual development, and that's why it's also very important to study this method step by step and gradually advance. We've built a system in KabU where you can do that in a very gradual, systematic way. So some of the people here are perhaps KabU students in the first course, maybe in the second course. Maybe you're at the stage where you're moving from stage 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 and so forth. And at this point, I want to tell all of you that it's really important to stick to that system because it builds the right foundations in you and gradually shows you how to position yourself correctly, how to relate correctly to this network of seekers, to the network of people who study Kabbalah together, and begin to really, really use it in a way that enhances your spiritual quest, that empowers each and every one who is connected to this network. All right, I'm gonna take a look at some questions and let's see what we have here. Victor says, I guess in relation to what we just discussed, this network, sounds like creating a spiritual bubble, question mark. That's actually a good point, Victor, because in a way we are creating a bubble, but let me add a reservation here. What's unique about this this method and this environment is that this bubble that we put ourselves in, it happens in our hearts. It happens in our mind and heart. And so on the outside, a person who studies Kabbalah, a person who practices this method and advances, could be reaching very deep levels of spiritual development, while potentially none of that will be seen on the outside to the naked eye, to the physical five senses. So we're not secluding ourselves in a physical way. We're not advising anyone who studies Kabbalah to seclude themselves, go to live in a cave, or this can detach from the world, go to a mountain and sit there and be alone. That's not what we practice. It's true that in the past, and I mean hundreds and even thousands of years ago, the method was different, in the sense that the world was also in a different stage of development, and there were cases where Kabbalists uh, would seclude themselves, but it was also because they could have been under threats and similar situations. But even then, they were still in a group. In our case, in our time, for our generation, we are already mingled with the world, and the entire world is so interconnected and interdependent in a way that it's unrealistic to try to really seclude yourself, nor is it productive for spiritual development. What we need to do is create that bubble in our minds and hearts, and that is by raising the importance of this connection between us, beginning to develop a feeling of how this connection that we have, us spiritual seekers, how that is important to us, and we want to be nourished by it. And so this way, you live wherever you are, and there's another person wherever they are, and you could be assisting each other even without speaking to each other directly. Um, and that is something that we are also gradually developing, this feeling that you're always connected to the other people who are practicing this method along with you. Of course, part of our practice is to also make physical and virtual connections as much as possible, just like right now, right? I'm giving this broadcast from Israel. There's people all around the world connected to it, and we've set a time, we carved out a time in our schedule to be together and focus on spiritual development. And in that, we are elevating everyone in this bubble. But then we go back to our lives and we live them however we do and wherever we are. And the challenge or the effort is to try to continue our life with this feeling of being connected to a network of other seekers, like-minded seekers, and that we're constantly supporting each other, helping each other enhance our connection with the deeper connected reality. Um, that's really a unique thing in the wisdom of Kabbalah. It is not an individual practice per se. It is also not a collective pursuit per se. It is both individual and collective at the same time, because you develop individually by connecting to others. And this is this sort of bilateral way in which it works. This kind of two sides to this, and it's in all levels and in all degrees of spiritual development. There's always the individual development is intertwined with our collective development. Here's another question from Reality Expansion Vault. That's a nice name. So you're asking, if this wisdom is the key to reality, why isn't it exploding in the world? What's the real barrier? And what must we do beyond a new mobile app to break it? All right, so I'm not sure who this is, but it sounds like you are uh, a student who's with us for quite a while, and you also know about some of our plans. And you're also absolutely right. There is a barrier. Bala Sulam, the great Kabbalist of the previous century, writes about it. He called this an iron wall standing between us, meaning people, humans, and the wisdom of Kabbalah. You're right. I'm not going to go into the whole history of Kabbalah, but uh, long story short, about 2,000 years ago, this wisdom was completely hidden. And there's reasons for that, spiritual reasons, um, but it has to do with the development, the maturity of mankind. See, the problem is that the reason you are sensitive to this wisdom, the reason you can hear it and feel it and work with it, is because you are developed. It's because your desire for spirituality, what Kabbalists call the point in the heart, that seeker point within you is developed. You probably aren't aware of that, but you've been developing that point for many life cycles. And the fact that it appears to you right now in this uh, uh, reality, in time and space, it's just the tip of the iceberg. It represents an entire evolution, spiritual evolution that you already went through. And so the world en masse, all of humanity, is also developing. But there's a difference between what we call collective providence, let's call it like that, and individual providence. In a nutshell, all of humanity en masse, the mass of humanity, develops according to a different program than unique individuals in every generation, and there were much, much less of them. There were just a handful of people in ancient times. In our time, we're already talking about um, thousands and dozens of thousands of people, and that's a lot because humanity is built in a spiritual sense, much like a pyramid. And that pyramid it has a very, very, I can't even, do the shape of it correctly because I won't have enough space here in my frame. But the base of the pyramid is actually very, very broad, and the tip of the pyramid is very, very tiny. And this is similar to how everything else in nature works. If you look into, for instance, how our body is governed by our brain, there's really a small area in the brain that conducts most of the operation of the entire body. Of course, there's nervous system that spans throughout the whole body, but ultimately there's a very small area in our brain that governs the entire body. And in anywhere you look in nature, the more qualitative forces are typically the more qualitative they are, the less quantitative they are. And so it is the same with regards to the spiritual development of mankind. That barrier um, is a matter of development. And um, what we don't see is that every little step that we do, those who are already conscious of spiritual development, who can see that this is the purpose of human development, when we make even just the slightest effort, we need to realize that we're pulling everyone else with us, even if we can't see it. And at some point, the program of what we call collective providence. When I say providence, don't interpret it in a religious sense. It's the plan. It's the nature's plan, if you will. It is the plan, the Creator's plan, the thought of creation that governs and pushes all of creation to its purpose. And so we want, of course, the people who are interested in spiritual development, we want to see the world developing, but there are certain layers of the levels of this development, this evolution, spiritual evolution that need to happen, and we need to do our part. So we do externally whatever we can. We tell people about it. We come up with some ideas like a mobile app, as you mentioned, or like this broadcast right now that is open to anyone who's interested. But the need in humanity is still brewing, and the more we can both tell them about humanity's purpose and uh, move towards that on our own, the less time and suffering will be required for most of humanity to develop. You're right. Has been and is the prayer and the cry of the Kabbalists for a generation. Rabash, my teacher's teacher, who wrote the quote we read a few minutes ago, said that in another article. He writes that when I look at the world and I see all the wars and all the conflicts and all of the suffering, uh, it makes me focus on just one thing, and that is doing my work of prayer for love of others to dwell in mankind. And love of others will not happen without spiritual development. They're one and the same. And that's why true world peace, true peace in the world, will never come without spiritual development. The two are intertwined. What we think of as peace in corporeal terms, these are not peace. It's not peace. It's all kinds of agreements, treaties that have to do with economics, that have to do with military agreements. They're not a change of heart. They don't represent any spiritual development of the people, any development of human perception where we actually begin to feel as one. And that's what's required, and that's the barrier. And but the people who are here are already working to gradually dissolve this barrier. And we should trust that even if we don't see it clearly, that is what is happening in the system, even when we're just making the slightest effort that we can to develop in this direction. Let's go to another question. Um, um, Dr. Kananga. Hey Asaf, why is that the Sfirot does not take into account Uranus and Neptune and Pluto? Okay. Here's what I'll say to that. You've heard about the concept of the 10 Sfirot. What is this? We could talk a lot about that. The great Kabbalist the Ari wrote the book Tree of Life, which is all about the structure of the 10 Sfirot, the structure of the upper worlds, and there's at least 2,000 pages there. So, it's very limited what we can say, but I will say this. The 10 Sfirot represent the 10 qualities through which the created being connects to the Creator. Or in other words, the revelation of the Creator happens through these 10 qualities. The last 10th Sphira, Malchut, represents the quality of the created being. The first Sphira, the highest Sphira, Keter, represents the quality of the Creator and all of his thought in relation to the created being. And everything in between, the 8 remaining Sphirot in between, they're like the qualities through which the Malchut, the created being, connects to the Keter, the Creator. That means that in that connection, everything ultimately is included. That includes also how our world looks like. Ultimately, what we see in this world. Baal Sulam writes in one of his articles that mathematics and music, even, and all of the different sciences of the world, and of course, astrophysics, as you mentioned, the star systems, the solar systems, and so forth. All of that is also ultimately arranged according to the order of those qualities, the 10 sfirot. We can't necessarily see these connections. That requires a very, very high level of spiritual development to know all of these connections between the roots and the branches, meaning the corporeal outcomes and the spiritual causes. And but the connection is definitely there. So you will only see mentions here and there in some writings of the Kabbalists. They don't engage in that much in terms of what we have as written texts, but certainly all of the natural systems of the world, including those beyond planet Earth, what we think of as outer space. I'm saying what we think of because that's how the world appears to us. It's not actually the structure of the world. But all of those orders and conducts of the universe, they also abide by the same order of the connection between the creator and the created being, which we refer to as 10 sfirot. Um, Here is another question from To Be Conscious. Hello, Asaf. Good to see you. Can you tell me if the KabU community is steadily growing? Thank you. Yes, I can tell you that the KabU community is steadily growing. Sometimes it grows faster, sometimes it grows slower, but generally, yes, we are seeing what you can call a steady growth, and that's very, it brings us a lot of hope. Um, but I will also say that KabU is only the education center that we have in the English language. We are part of a global organization called Bnei Baruch Kabbalah Education and Research Institute, founded by my teacher, Kabbalist Dr. Michael Leitman. And this is a global organization that has students pretty much all around the world. I think there's only maybe a handful of places around the world where we don't have students. I won't say that we have many students in every place. No, sometimes it's very few students, but they're still there, and that global community is is practicing this method from day to day, building these connections of the heart between us, throughout our community, and from our hearts towards the Creator. Um, we are also, by the way, just because we brought it up, I'll say a few words about it. In a few days, in fact, we're going to have an international conference. We have these global events once every few months. We typically have them at least 3 times a year. And typically one a year is also has a physical center in Israel where thousands of people come from around the world, but also many other people, thousands of other people are connected to it virtually. And that's typically how our events look like. They are hybrid events where there's a gathering, a central gathering, or many gatherings, and those who can't come to a gathering physically connect virtually. And these are advanced students who are longtime students who are studying the method for at least some months, typically years, and are practicing it in groups, study groups, or research groups, you can call them. The spiritual term for that is tens. This is a reference to the structure of the 10 sfirot. It doesn't have to be 10 people in such a group. It could be a little less, it could be a little more, but that's more or less the number. And in those research groups, our ongoing students around the world are practicing the same method and studying from the same sources and advancing together as a global community. So that's important to know as well, that here we're doing this in English, but it's actually a global organization that you're seeing here. Let's see if I can take a few more questions. I'll just mention to anyone who's here that in less than 10 minutes, we will move on to a Zoom also dedicated for continuing this Q&A, but this one is for KabU students. So if you are a KabU student, you'll get the link. If you're not a KabU student, you can register to KabU for free. There's a free trial that you can try out, and you'll get access both to these Zoom sessions, like the one we're going to have in a few minutes, and also to everything else in KabU. So there's probably a link in the chat right now, so you can check it out and you can register and join our Zoom, our Q&A Zoom, which will happen in just a few minutes. Let's see if we can take a couple more questions before we go. Nika is asking, what makes war so central to creation? Can Kabbalah illuminate a path to peace? Thank you for this question, Nika. I think it's very relevant, both to what we're talking about and also to our time. Our world is indeed in turmoil, and we see that, surprisingly or not, it is a paradox. Our civilization is the most advanced it's ever been. We are so technologically evolved. We are connected across the planet. We have globalized relationships in terms of economics and politics and media and so on. And we live in a world where we have technology and medicine and education and so forth, and yet we can't stop killing each other. Armed conflicts, as I said in the beginning, I looked into it. They say that there's about 100 armed conflicts in the world right now. What's going on? How is it possible that we, educated, evolved human beings in the 21st century, with all that we have, with all of our educational and technological infrastructure, how could it be that we can't stop this one thing, which is stop fighting each other physically, violently, and stop killing each other? That, when you look at this paradox in the face, right, you have to wonder, what is it? What's going on here? We see that war is not a matter of something that belonged to ancient times. And today, as we develop, we become more and more peaceful. Maybe we see, maybe, depends where, maybe we see less brutality, more diplomacy. Let's say so. Even that is in question. But wars didn't vanish from planet Earth at all. Armed conflicts are happening. Military expenses are rising all around the world. What's going on here, right? That comes from a very deep spiritual reason. The fact is that what we think of as war is comes from a spiritual tension that underlies everything in reality. And that tension is the tension between two opposite forces. Our entire world, I can't expand on this too much time right now because we don't have the time bar, but all of reality is actually broken to two opposites that are in constant tension, in constant dance with each other, in constant interrelation with each other. And they appear to us as ebb and flow and light and darkness and plus and minus and male and female and light and darkness, as I said, left and right, up and down. It appears in our body in all kinds of ways, contraction and expansion. It's in how we breathe, inhale and exhale. It's everywhere. In every level of reality, throughout the four levels of nature, still, vegetative, animate, and human. Also in our psychology, you will also see these conflicts between opposites. There is a tension that is threaded through all of reality. It's even in the structure, in the biological structure of many things, like the think about the shape, the double helix shape of DNA, right? It's there. There is it is essential to life. It is part of life, and that tension reaches completion and perfection only when all of creation reaches its purpose. So that is the very deep root of anything we think of as conflict or war. But does this mean that we must experience bloody wars, witness bloody wars in front of our eyes as long as we're alive until we come to that spiritual purpose and spiritual perfection? No. How that tension translates to our reality, that's exactly what's up to us. And uh, again, I can't expand on it much, but I'll give you a direction. That tension, when we develop spiritually, we begin to experience it within us. We begin to feel it as two opposite forces inside ourselves. We can call one the ego, the force that separates us from the others, pushes us away, makes us forget about the spiritual goal, about the spiritual purpose, makes us focus on our self interest only. And then there's another opposite force within us, which is the force of spiritual development, the force that pulls us out of ourselves into a connection with the rest of reality. And these two opposite forces are in constant conflict within us. And the more we can solve this conflict in our heart, and in every level, every spiritual degree, it is actually about fighting that conflict internally, spiritually. It's about discovering these two opposite forces to a greater and greater extent within us and learning how to rise above them and bring them together into what Kabbalists call the middle line. So this is called the work of three lines in Kabbalah. The left line, the let's call it the minus, the right line, call it the plus, and then the middle line is when we can combine both of them into a wholeness, into a completion, into a perfection. And that's the state that Kabbalists refer to as peace. And peace in the world, outside peace, between peoples, between countries, will not happen until that peace will happen in our hearts, because one is a mirror of the other, is a reflection of the other. And that's why spiritual development, as I said earlier, is intertwined with the with peace in the world. And that is also why, until we develop spiritually, we will see tension, and that tension, depending on our development, could become violent. If we learn how to contain it within us, the more we do so, the less it needs to manifest and materialize as violent conflicts. And that's why it's so important for Kabbalists to disseminate the wisdom of Kabbalah, because by spiritual development, we save corporeal suffering. Simple equation. The more humanity develops spiritually, the more people take that tension into their hearts and solve it there, the less it needs to appear as bloody wars in our world. I think this is a good point to conclude. So we'll have a few minutes also before our Q&A on Zoom for all of the KabU students. And again, I want to say, come to KabU and register so you can join this Zoom Q&A if you're interested. There's a free trial and you can check out all the details. There's a link in the chat. So, I'll be happy to see you there. I'll be there in just a few minutes. I want to conclude with another quote that's actually exactly relevant to what we just discussed. So here it is. This is from the great Kabbalist Baal HaSulam, Yehuda Ashlag. Baal HaSulam is his nickname. It means in Hebrew, it means master of the ladder. And he received that nickname because he wrote the ladder commentary on the book of Zohar, the most seminal book in the wisdom of Kabbalah, written about 2,000 years ago. And he wrote a sort of a ladder that leads a person to enter that amazing, incredible book, the book of Zohar. And therefore, he's called Baal HaSulam, master of the ladder. So in his article, The Peace, he writes this: all members of humanity will unite into one body and one heart, filled with knowledge of the Creator. Thus, world peace and the knowledge of the Creator are one and the same. I'll read it again. I'll let you just ponder on this for a bit instead of me saying more words, and we'll conclude there. All members of humanity will unite into one body and one heart, filled with knowledge of the Creator. Thus, world peace and the knowledge of the Creator are one and the same. All right, so this has been our Kabbalah Explained Simply Q&A session for today. Thank you very much for sending questions. I know we didn't get to all of them, but we did get to those we got to were excellent questions. So thank you. And next week, another instructor from KabU will be here. And I will be in the Zoom session for the KabU students or anyone who just registered. There's still a few minutes to do that. We'll be starting in something like 7 minutes from now. So I'll see you all there. Hopefully, those who are not registered will do so in the next few minutes, and then we'll meet. So see you there. Thank you for joining this session. Then thank you for sending questions, and all the best. Bye-bye.